I just want to say welcome to all of you to coming back, joining us for the continuation of the Making the Invisible Visible series. It has been a journey and it continues. We are, what I'm already seeing welcomes and hellos in the chat. We are a chatting community, so please introduce yourself, say where you're from, get those questions and thoughts ready. We use a lot of +1s and smiley faces and all of that as we go through, just to engage in this conversation together. So please say hello to each other and just know how glad we are to be back with you in this conversation. The Making the Invisible Visible series really kind of got going in the fall as we were all saying, okay, how do we get ready for this year to come, this year that we are now in? What is it going to take as we think about building forward together? How are we going to come together as partners at the national level, at the local level, across all of the places where children and youth spend their time, and think about what is this new future that we're going into going to look like, and how is it going to look so much better than the one that we've not just experienced in this past year, but in these decades and years past, where the systems that we've had have just not been meeting the needs of all of our children, youth, and families. So how are we really tackling this in a new way, and coming out of the conversations that we had over the fall, where we had 5 thorny issues that we really kind of grappled with, to say what do we need to do to be able to do business really differently. We've continued to engage with a group of local champions who have been thinking about how this work is really carrying out in places. With national partners such as the American Association, or the ASA, the School Administrators Association, and others, about how to really think about this work in a way that does focus on the together, focuses on how we are really connecting across all of those different committed actors and communities, and what does that look like. Today's conversation, as we continue that, is really going to be looking at the national, state, and local level of how people are bringing this work into action. And to get us going, just wanted to share a couple of ideas that have been sharpening for us throughout the conversations with you. And that really is trying to think about the goals of this Build Forward Together work. How are we really thinking, and we've all been coming, how do we build back schools in a different, more powerful way, but how are we doing that across this broader learning and development ecosystem? So there is that building back schools better, but a big part of the conversation has been about how do we make more visible and strengthen and leverage those community partners, and have it not just be unnamed community, but have a real sense of the range of partners that are there that have really been those hubs and those connectors for years, and especially stepped up in this year past to play that kind of role. How are we really investing in adolescents? They're often not a part of the conversation, and how are they directly involved in those conversations, but also how are they at the center of what we're thinking about, the youth and young adults that we're connecting with and supporting and just co-creating with during these times. And then really, how are we using summers? And this is today's conversation. How are we using summers to really innovate towards that long-term change? There's been a lot of conversations nationally and locally about how to use summer as a springboard to what comes next. How is it a down payment? How is it that space that we can really think together differently and really experiment together to make things happen across the ecosystem in ways that really are connecting and engaging directly with our young people. So how are we thinking about that? And whichever door in we're coming to that conversation, and what these goals could look like, what we've been exploring out of the 5 thorny issues that we started with in the fall is really how to turn those into action. What are the strategies that can really make a difference in that? And how are we really thinking about what it looks like to build back smarter in ways that really are engaging around the academic, cognitive, social, and emotional development of our young people? What does it look like to have systems that are building back smarter? How are we building back broader in terms of the range of community partners and parents and young people that can be a part of this work together? How are we being bolder in terms of that work, and really thinking about what it is to address this in a way that is tackling more of those systemic challenges? How are we really understanding and unpacking what we're seeing in terms of inequity, and how are we getting the data that really helps us understand that picture, and how are we building on adolescence determination? How are we really getting that sense of what adolescent learning looks like, what the brain science looks like, and also what adolescents just determination to be able to create and activate and bring about change in their communities. What does that look like as well? And how do those strategies really help with each of those goals? As we've been looking at that in the summer conversation, a lot of it is just around this conversation of loss and learning loss, and how are we even framing that differently? How are we thinking differently together so that we can see differently and act differently in the learning equation? If we just pop forward one more visual that we have here, we're often in this conversation about how are we making up for and not really recognizing and seeing the learning that has taken place. So how, even as we move into summer, these are the conversations that we've been hearing from folks about re-engaging learners in ways that really are interest driven, that are opportunities to explore and to master content, that are relationship rich, and that are really starting with that as a way to build the kind of resilience routines that we need. That yes, there is a recovery from trauma. Yes, there is how do we build on the foundational skills that every young person needs, but how do we balance out that that picture and that equation as we're thinking together about what this summer can look like? So as we think about this opportunity in the summer months to really optimize learning, realize that normal is not an option. We need to think about the summer in really different ways. What we wanted to turn to were some stories, again, from people that are doing this right now, real time, thinking about how summer can look different. And we're going to kick this off with a video from our friends in Tulsa as they're talking about what they're doing there in the schools and with their community partners. And then I'll be turning over to my colleague, Catherine Plug Martinez, who has been connecting with all of your speakers today to be able to tell their stories. And we are off to the races. So video first, and then Catherine.
In my role, I have the ability to say, school leaders, I expect every school to offer summer learning, not summer school. I don't want to talk about summer school. We're not designing summer school. I don't want to talk about worksheets and boring experiences and more school that didn't work for the kids who need it most. I want to talk about fun, connective, summer learning that is accelerating, that is like identity affirming, and it is going to create the time and space that young people need to have real conversations about racial injustice in this country and what their experience has been across the past year, to have real, candid, vulnerable conversations with adults who are ready to engage in them about what it's been like to live through COVID, and to feel socially isolated, and to like learn online, and to fall behind, and to have to try to like, you know, pull back up again. Like, we need to create space for kids to have those conversations in meaningful ways that, again, help them make meaning of their own experience and help them be affirmed for who they are and what they are capable of doing and what they bring to the conversation each day. But we have to create the space. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to do it, right? We're going to make sure that every kid in our community, whether it's coming to one of our summer learning academies or taking part in the church in their neighborhood's summer program, every kid needs access to some opportunities. We're going to do that, and we're going to keep track of it. We're not just going to talk about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marita, for that introduction. And I always love hearing from Paula Shannon, the Deputy Superintendent in Tulsa Public Schools. And Maggie just shared in the chat for all of you a blog that really outlines Tulsa's work to build forward together. And as Marita shared, we are just really excited about these efforts to think about how do we go beyond just building schools back better, to really think about how we engage all of our partners and to leverage the opportunities of this summer and summers beyond. Build Forward Together is really grounded deeply in the lessons learned that we've learned throughout the last year and the dual pandemics that we have been living through. So today we really want to lift up and make visible lessons that have been learned on the ground and hear from our national and local partners how they're leveraging those learnings to really make this summer a place for continued growth and innovation, how it's spreading into the school year and beyond. So I am thrilled to welcome our panelists. I am joined by Jess Banks, who is from Bell Excel's Sperling Center for Research and Innovation, Will Cardwell from Boston After School and Beyond, and Arthur Pearson from Thompson Island Outward Bound, which is in Boston. So I have a series of questions for our panelists. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat so I can swerve if anything comes up for you all. And we are just going to jump right in because, as always, I'm trying to pack more in than is probably feasible for the time that we have. So that's the way I like to do it. So Jess, I'm going to start with you. I have gotten to see Bell Excel's work on the ground here in Denver for many years, but I know that not everyone is familiar with your summer solution. So I'd love if you could share just a tiny bit about Bell Excel's summer solution, but then really dig in for us on what did you learn last summer about how you can adapt an evidence-based program and keep that fidelity while still really making it innovative and fit for the times? And then what are you thinking about taking from that into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So first, to give a little bit of context. So Bell Excel has been around for about 30 years now and has been delivering holistic evidence-based out-of-school time solutions in the summer and after-school space, over the course of that time. SCRI is a recently launched affiliate of Bell Excel, and we really serve as the research evaluation and capacity building arm, where we leverage the learnings and evidence on the Bell Excel side to support other youth-serving organizations in elevating, enhancing, growing, and scaling their programs to reach more services in youth. When talking about the Bell Excel solution specifically, we have always really effectively leverage partnerships, whether it be with charter schools, public schools, and districts, as well as community-based partners to deliver our different solutions. And traditionally, our summer in-person solution has included, social emotional learning, operational support, administration and guidance and coaching, academic and enrichment curriculum, assessment, evaluation, quality assurance, teacher PD, and of course, family engagement. And so, as you can imagine, these have always been delivered for the past 30 years in an in-person environment. So us, like many others, quickly needed to pivot last spring and really think about what does it mean to maintain our evidence base in recognition of this new environment. And really tapping into the partnerships that we created was really essential to the redesign of our in-person program to what's now known as Scholar Zone Flex, which is our remote and hybrid version of our traditional in-person programming. And so we wanted to keep all of the tenets of our core program, making up for learning loss, but also wanted to account for issues of equity, including tech access, acknowledge the virtual burnout, but still keep that thread on the whole child, as well as grounded in our mission and evidence base. And so, first and foremost, leveraging our current partners is really essential in unearthing some of the key innovations that we needed to make and tweaks to our program in order to meet the moment and respond to the remote learning environment. So that included things like the need for a technology assessment that could be included in enrollment materials so that our local partners had an understanding of what was the technology availability in the home and how they needed to adapt their program in response to those local needs and capacities, as well as the need for in-person tangible materials. And then that led to logistical considerations about how do we support our partners in distributing all of these materials to teachers and families, as well as this idea of flexibility in scheduling, as well as instructional design. And so that led to us really working with our partners, not only different schedules, but redesigning all of our activity materials so that any activity had considerations for if it was being delivered with support of a teacher online, whether it was being supported by a family member or caregiver who had availability to support that activity, or whether the student was accessing that learning individually. You know, we didn't want to lose the thread if someone lost technology or couldn't access. We wanted to make sure we were creating conditions for the learning to happen regardless of what the environment looked like. And so that really involved a lot of tapping in and understanding how we were supporting our partners from a central level on understanding their local capacity and community needs to implement that equitable experience. We also tapped into strategic partnerships to fill gaps where we didn't, have any or needed capacity. So for things like physical health and well-being, we partnered with Well Together Now. One thing that actually Paula just spoke of in the opening was the importance of social emotional learning, safety, and SEL. This came through consistently. And so we really took a lot of time intentionally in building in SEL rituals and routines throughout all aspects of our program. And we had some interesting, although not surprising findings, was that we actually saw that with the intentional focus on SEL and creating these safe environments, it actually elevated the technology confidence from students, families, as well as educators in being able to access the learning, which created a lot more meaningful meaningful experiences in the distance learning environment, as well as built really incredible relationships that we got feedback on just hadn't been built in the remote environment in the spring. And so that was something that was, really exciting. And again, really couldn't have taken place had we not leveraged the amazing partnerships that we already had access to, and really thinking about what does that adaptation look like, while also, again, being true to our mission and our evidence base.
Great. Yeah, I love that piece around the importance of SEL and tech confidence. Again, Maggie just shared some more on that in the chat. It's so interesting to think about when you talk about those conditions for learning and why they're so vital. That's a great example of it. It's not just that the SEL helps the brain be ready to absorb the content, it actually helps you be able to learn and understand the tech and be able to use it. So really, really neat to think about how we continue to do that as these types of differentiated learning and different modalities that can happen everywhere really continue. Will, I want to turn to you with a really similar question. Boston After School and Beyond has been supporting summer programming in partnership with Boston Public Schools for more than a decade now. And partnership was really started with a premise of understanding how can we use summer to think about how school can look different. It's kind of everything we're talking about right now with Build Forward Together. How can we bring it all together and make it look different? So knowing that, and knowing that you were already building from a place of innovation, what have you learned over the course of the last year? And how has it really continued to push your thinking, not just about summer programming, but into this school year, into next summer, into the school year beyond?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you everyone for having me here. Yeah, so we kind of started with a foundational question 10 years ago, where we really just kind of wanted to know, what does school look like? And then more importantly, what does summer look like for youth and families that are not from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds? And what can we do collectively with the programs throughout our city that are already serving youth? How can we connect them more explicitly with schools to not only kind of provide the after school and in-school push-in, but we have 3 months in the summer where learning may or may not take place for our children. And we wanted to kind of think of a creative way in which we could bring these two entities together that are already doing the same comparable work and make one another stronger. And Arthur, being one of the foundational partners, can also attest to this. But what it led to was, as many of you may know, the national randomized study with the Wallace Foundation and the RAND Corporation. We became a part of that 3 years after we started in 2013 with a number of other cities across the country. And surprisingly, we found that when you integrate enrichment and enrichment after school partners with schools during the summertime, it works, and it helps support the opportunities, the learning, and the skill development that young people from disadvantaged backgrounds don't get the same equal access to. So what we've learned is that you have to focus on high quality, that these young people deserve this. Our network puts a lot of time and effort into measuring and understanding what we're doing well. As was already mentioned, we have a large focus on SEL, as well as skill development. And so while schools do a great job of focusing on the academic pieces that young people need, our partners were really strong in focusing on the skills that beget academic success. And so what we found was that, to no shock of ours, when young people are engaged in high quality programs with schools, teachers, and program partners, we can help mitigate, in many cases, increase the where a student is starting in the fall versus where they ended in the spring. And so, that kind of led to back to why we even wanted to investigate this in the first place. And that was, if this worked so well in the summer with schools and community partners working together, it's like, why would we not do this the entire year? We have partners that are integrated into the school. We have partners that are there after school. We have teachers that are present. Why can't the school day mirror what the traditional summer learning programs now look like? And, COVID kind of forced our hand as a district and as a community, organization to say, well, we kind of have to think about how we can continue to have that Wallace model live in the spring and the fall, because our children weren't going back into the buildings at the same rate as others were. And so what we learned was that we've kind of continued the model through the creation of hubs throughout the city, where schools might have their teachers virtually patch in, but students might attend a local YMCA next to their school and do their learning and their enrichment there. And then their teachers kind of virtually connect in and they provide the academics. And then right after the academics, the students stay for enrichment. And in many cases, students will stay the entire day until families are able to kind of have them come home. And so we've, our model and tagline is that, we started out to turn the city into a classroom. And kind of what we've learned through COVID is that we genuinely have done that. It looks that way in the summer. It's continued to look that way in the fall and into the spring. And we're starting to get to that original kind of what you would think of as a pie in the sky. Oh, it'd be great if one day we could get there to where this is how the school day looks. And we kind of had to quickly make that reality possible. And it's been a great relationship with our school district, because we started 10 years ago looking at summer. We have we have a proof of concept, we have evidence. Now it's just kind of really working moving forward for subsequent summers and school years, is how do we take this model that we know works, and how do we continue to embed it into our school system, so that way school does mirror more like summer, and we are starting to chip away at the traditional model of schooling, much in the same way that we chipped away at the traditional model of what summer school looks like for young people. So, we're really excited that we've had partners that have been eager and willing to kind of go deeper into this work with us during the school year. And now we have many school leaders and our superintendent who is interested in thinking about, for the most marginalized youth, how do we make this model like their model this year? And so just this morning, we had a call in training with 30 programs in our city that are doing that model right now for young people, either virtually, hybrid, or remote. And this is how they're going to continue to experience school for the time being. And then our hope is that when we go back to hopefully things as they were in the fall, in terms of being able to be together, that we don't lose the essence of this new model and this the momentum that we've built up in having school mirror more what summer looks like, because we know that's where young people are really gravitating, but also are demonstrating more success and efficacy.
Great. Yeah, we talk a lot about the walls being softer right now, and that ability for folks to think and to imagine that maybe this model can stick, and maybe it is time to think about what it looks like and how we can at least try it out with a small group and think about expanding it. That's the opportunity where we can try it out in summer and then see what we can make stick. And so you talked about your group of partners on the ground, and Arthur, that's you. You've been on this ride through the whole journey that Will talked about. And I'd love to throw two questions your way, if you don't mind. The first is just, What has it been like to be a partner on this journey, and how has having Boston After School and Beyond as the intermediary helped you engage with schools in this reimagining? And then, similar to the question that I asked Jess and Will, just talked a lot about technology use. Would love to hear a little bit about how you're thinking about how technology fits into an outward bound program longer term. So two-part question there.
Great, yeah, and so part one, I feel like when you have an intermediary and that articulates a vision, as Will just did, like we get to sign up and say that's the flag we're marching under, because that's inspiring. And that was what it felt like in 2010 when this whole show started as a pilot program, and it's what it still feels like now. And Thompson Island, and that's Thompson Island behind me there. That's the Thompson Island Salt Marsh. And yes, that is the skyline of Boston behind. And we are that close to Boston, and we have 240 acres. And by tapping into the movement that Boston After School and Beyond creates, we can be part of a network of organizations that are doing this. I mean, we can only get so many kids to the island, but it is incredibly compelling to be part of a citywide effort. And through this organization, frankly, a national effort, and that counts too. First and foremost for us on the ground, Boston After School and Beyond provides a community of practice, which is to say we have benefited immeasurably by getting to know our friends at Hale Reservation, which is a fabulous program right outside of Boston, about 1,500 acres of land. They are not surrounded by water, which is a big plus logistically. But Boston Nature Center, Blue Hills Reservation, we have all been brought together. We all have similar nature-based programming. And now we have a community of practice that's basically brokered by Boston After School and Beyond. That means a certain amount of common professional development. It means we agree on a common social and emotional learning framework. We have common evaluation and assessment of outcomes, and we all get the same, report card at the end of the summer on how we performed relative to our peers. And that in itself, once you get over the fear of being judged, is truly invaluable. That community of practice that's hinged around a common language and common assessment and the impact they're having on kids. I also believe we have combined impact. I believe that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And there's money, which is from the beginning, Boston After School and Beyond, in partnership with the Boston Public Schools, can access sources of money that no single program in Boston can access. When Will referred to the Wallace Foundation's 4-year project, Wallace Foundation was brought into town by a combination of Boston After School and Beyond and the Boston Public Schools. They only take on cities or regions as units of study. We were lucky enough to be part of that, and they funded the program for 4 years. It doesn't get better than that. And so that is a big part of it. But the way it was structured, we also had to leverage our donors, donors who are drawn to a particular flavor of Outward Bound or are drawn to a place like Thompson Island. We are able to leverage them for the cause. And so, there are people that have been supporting Thompson Island literally for decades because they love it as a place and love it as an Outward Bound school, who now consider themselves supporters of summer learning as a nationally important sort of movement. And that's just a better place to be in, to feel like you're educating your donors about what is important to the city as a whole, how do you be part of a citywide effort, and how do you be part of a national movement. We're able to leverage donors. You also asked about technology. I'll jump to technology. So we went completely virtual last year, and I'm going to say we're all looking forward to being in person for the first time with students this coming May. And it's a huge motivator for the whole organization. I never thought I would hear myself say that online team building actually works quite well. And we worked out, online team building in collaboration with Outward Bound USA and a couple of the other Outward Bound schools in the Outward Bound Professional Learning Lab. And we have gotten pretty proficient at doing what we call crew classes. And our summer program this coming summer will be 21 days on island in residence. It will basically be some sleepover camp for 21 days. But it will tee up project-based learning on the stewardship of the land and the island and the ecology of the island. And they will then go home, and for 2 weeks, they will work together virtually with their facilitators and their Boston Public School teacher to prepare their project for presentation back on the island after 3 months at home. So we're really running a 6-week program here, 3 weeks on the island, 3 weeks at home working with us virtually, followed by a project presentation as the culmination event. And we now realize we can connect with kids on the island and make a very intense bond between those kids and our facilitators and sustain that throughout the school year, even when it is, when you can't get to the island. So it's a game changer. And we never would have gone in that direction. We would have considered ourselves the antithesis of going in that direction until we now see how it can amplify the work.
That's great. Yeah, that amplification of relationships, and you spend all the time building a crew, and then that ability to keep them together is really exciting. You all have already hit so much on partnerships and the together in this, the partnership between school and community-based organizations. Arthur talked about the community of practice between different organizations. I want to dig in a little bit more on that. And Jess, I really want to think about it in terms of staffing for this summer. I mean, we know that kids more than ever before need robust summer experiences this year for healing, for academic acceleration, to have some fun, to reconnect with each other as human beings. But we keep hearing, and it's true, teachers and youth development professionals alike are exhausted. So I'm wondering how the power and potential of summer for innovation and how partnership is helping you generate excitement for staff to engage this summer.
Yeah, it's a great question, Catherine. And you're absolutely right. This is something that we are hearing more and more, this idea of burnout. And it's completely understandable, right? I love being here talking with all of you, and the Zoom fatigue is real. It's something that, I think going into last summer, there was a lot of optimism, like fingers crossed, maybe now after an entire year of this, there's a huge level of exhaustion. As you mentioned, though, we are really capitalizing our messaging on that idea of the potential of summer. And I think you had it up on one of your opening slides, this idea like normal is not going to do it, like more of the same is not going to do it. So we are really, emphasizing messaging around, and working with our partners to think about, how are we creating a summer as a low pressure environment, a time to, yes, make up learning, honor the learning, and also, do it in a way that is lower pressure than maybe we've seen in the traditional school year, especially this past school year. Making sure that we're building opportunities to learn new skills and experiment with new techniques, and both for students, but also educators, really an innovation, using summer as an innovation hub. As you said, the opportunity to reconnect and build relationships, and of course, something new and fun. For teachers specifically, we've found that summer is really an incredible time for them to learn new strategies and techniques, as well as an opportunity to provide really critical developmental feedback on planning and implementation and the way that they're engaging with students and collaborating. And we actually have a recent study that came out from RAND, showing how summer has those unique opportunities that can translate into the school year. On the partnership side and the organizational side, one of the things that's really interesting is, we've done a lot and seen a lot about the individual capacity building of teachers and the effects of students. What we're also seeing now is how experience in summer programs can translate to changes on the organizational level or the school district level. Again, this idea of showing new and innovative things that are possible and giving people the opportunity to experiment, to try them out, to see how those could work for their systems. So just as, some some quick examples. We're continuing to explore this idea of, organizational impact. But, for example, in 2020, since we had so many partners, as I said before, that now had to figure out how to distribute these materials, across a greater range than they ever had before. No longer were students coming into one location. Now it was, how are we getting these all out to students and families? And one partner that had quite a significant geographic location, we worked closely with them to understand the distribution processes and, come up with different methods to make sure everyone had what they needed in time. And this particular partner had other services to the community, including tax services, and they actually leveraged the experience of the summer distribution of materials to then support their community in making sure that all their taxes were done, and change the way they delivered those services based on the way they'd innovated summer. Similarly, we have a very positive, positive behavior management approach, to our systems, as well as, again, that SEL integration. And one of our partners who, ran an after school program that had a little bit of a more, that had some elements that were a little bit more, punitive in terms of behavior management. Once they saw the impact of the positivity, the relationship building, the SEL for summer, they retransformed their entire approach to behavior management, in response to the results that they saw during the summer. So, and so when we think about, these different skills and summers and innovation, it really is thinking about, what do you want your staff and yourself to be able to learn and try in the summer? What is your capacity to do so? And what are some opportunities to partner with other people to learn and grow from, other organizations, other schools, other partnerships? And again, we personally have seen that power, over the course of our time. And I'm very, optimistic about continuing to see that, going into this summer and beyond.
That's great. Yeah, I love what you talked about there in terms of just that trying one thing can really spread and grow. So when we talk about innovation, it doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to be giant changes, but how do you try something to make that down payment and then figure out how it can spread for the organization, for the system? Great. Well, we are getting close to our breakout time, but I want to bring in one more area of partnership into our together, and that's families and parents. I think that COVID closures and being online really helped us rethink how we connect with and engage in parents. And Will, I'd love to throw it to you. When you think about Build Forward Together, you talked about the learning hubs, you talked about how you're thinking about the replication of this summer model. How are you engaging parents as partners in those conversations? What does that look like for Boston After School and Beyond, and for your partners?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we support approximately 160 to 200 different sites throughout the city, and we are not a program provider, so we often lean on our partners in terms of messaging kind of their work, connecting with their families, with their partner schools, but also kind of for my role is working with the district at the higher level, who kind of works with the 130 plus schools within our city, to understand like what are the opportunities. I think even talking about doing this work 10 years ago, we still have families that don't know and understand like the existence and the importance of summer learning. We still hear from a lot of families who want to know like what opportunities and options that their children have, because unfortunately it's still not reached a level to where it's known and well understood by every family involved. We're still working on the traditional summer school ideology where the school's going to assign my child to a program if they need to be in a program, and that's no longer the case in the city of Boston. So, just to say that, we've been doing a lot of work on like kind of psychoeducation with families about kind of the new summer learning, the new model, who our partners are, what they do, what they focus on. We are skill centric. We have teachers that focus on academics, but not every child and every family kind of wants that. And so we try to make sure that we have enough within our network to meet all the different needs. So kind of some of the things that we've been doing more recently is having family conversations, either through holding events where we invite our partners, we invite families throughout the district, and then we give them space virtually to just kind of talk and let families tell partners, this is what I'm looking for, and then have our partners that like can offer it kind of step up and say, hey, we can work with your students. We offer that kind of programming. And then I think just kind of working with BPS and the communication department to just help them better understand the language that families need to see when they're looking for programs, a better way to kind of like help communicate and create flyers that are multilingual for, you know, the diverse range of families that we have within our network. And then I think more importantly, it's to, again, unpack what families think about when they hear summer learning versus what summer learning actually is. So if I just say like, hey, we want to have you in a summer learning program at Thompson Island, because of the historical relationship that families and youth have had with schools, they may think, oh, I don't want my child to be in another classroom. This didn't work well for them during the school year. Why would it work for them on Thompson Island during the summer? And helping them understand like, that's not the kind of programming that, you know, Arthur's team runs. And like, it's very diverse. It's very hands-on. It's going to be sales, skill, and academic centric. And I think that for families, once they start to know and hear more from us and our partners about the diverse way in which we approach summer learning, they then start to become more receptive to engaging. And then they're really curious about like, what is it all that the city of Boston has to offer? So, you know, we're still some ways on kind of getting that to saturation. But, you know, again, because of COVID, we've had to, you know, be more strategic in who we're targeting and messaging, because historically we hadn't been targeting families. And now that's a really strong component to the work we do, is making sure families know all the great things that our partners are capable of.
That's great. Yeah, and Karen just shared in the chat, right, that we want to think about flexibility to choose how, where, and with whom to engage in learning. And that parent component and their understanding of what we're offering is such a critical element of that. And I think about it myself as a parent. COVID has taught me a ton about how my kids learn best. And so now my ability to think about what I would need to and want to ask of a program is really different as well. I don't want to stop this conversation, and I think it's my job to do so. So I'm going to pause us there. But the great news about our Making the Invisible Visible format is we're actually just beginning the conversation. So I want to share a couple of things, and then I'm going to talk to you about our breakout groups and give us the chance to dig in and really grapple with each other and about some of these topics and take them a little further. But first, the first thing I want to share with you all is that as of today, the Readiness Project has launched a Build Forward Together website and landing page. So Maggie's going to magically drop that in the chat for me. Build Forward Together landing page has updated tools and resources from the Readiness Project, has framing around the strategies that Marita talked about earlier, and will continue to be updated on an ongoing basis to help you think about in your communities and from your perspective, how you can engage in the type of partnership, innovation that Jess and Will and Arthur just spoke to. In addition to that, Marita said it, we're bringing back the Making the Invisible Visible series. We're going to be having these conversations once a month where we spend half our time in main stage discussion and half our time in breakout groups. And you might have noticed today that we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about a big aspect of summer, and that's summer jobs and the workforce, particularly for adolescents. And so next month on April 20th, we would love to have you join us for our next Making the Invisible Visible session, where we'll be doing a deep dive into Chicago's work around summer for adolescents and their robust workforce readiness programs. We're really excited for that one. So I wanted to give you those two quick tidbits. We welcome your ideas and feedback and want to hear what you're doing to build forward together so that we can spotlight it in the future. But we really use these Making the Invisible Visible sessions to help us think about that tool generation and understand even more what communities need. So we are going to move now into 4 breakout groups. If I can have that slide, perfect. Our first breakout group will be with Kim Robinson from the Forum's Weikert Center. And, you know, we just heard a lot about the great things that can be done, but it can be really, there's a lot of capacity that's needed. You heard from Arthur the value of having an intermediary to help support programs on the ground. So Kim's group is really going to talk through together and think about what is the needed capacity and infrastructure for the youth development field and community partner organizations. What planning learning is already going on in your communities? What supports are going to be needed to respond at scale? What do we need to be thinking about in terms of the workforce? And Meg Pittman from Boys and Girls Clubs of America and Mary Arnold from 4-H, the dynamic duo, as I like to call them, will be thinking about how national organizations can really be leveraged for summer success, what it means to be part of an affiliate and really engage, what supports they might need from the national organization. Jess is going to keep engaging with you on a both and strategy to accelerated learning. We talked a little bit, but didn't get in deeply. There are lots of calls right now for addressing learning loss. We really don't think it's about learning loss or SEL. We don't think it's about learning loss or accelerated learning. We think there's an opportunity for this both and strategy. So in the conversation with Jess, you'll have time to think about how we can ensure that all learning is social and emotional, how our academic focus can be more than just tutoring. As Karen mentioned in her chat, how we can think about formal, flexible, and free choice opportunities to engage. And last, but certainly absolutely not least, Bridget Ahern from Turnaround for Children is going to lead a discussion on prioritizing reconnection, resisting deficit thinking. We know that all kids are going to be entering our summer program having experienced some level of trauma. And how can we be ready to support them without feeling like we need to fix them? So what are your organizations thinking about in terms of trauma-informed approaches to summer? How can we acknowledge the power and potential of kids while still helping them come back? There are deeper descriptions of each of these breakouts at the bit.ly on the screen if you want to read more while you choose. But in the meantime, we are going to open up the breakout rooms. The new magical power of Zoom, you get to choose yourself. So breakout